This training video covers Step 6 of the HeavyJob Foreman's Reference Guide, adding cost code notes. In the video today, we're going to look at cost code notes, how to add them, the different types of notes, and also how to add note indexes or note templates to your cost code notes. The most important part of this training video for everyone to understand is that cost code notes are not optional. Cost code notes are a minimum expectation, and the minimum expectation is that you will enter a cost code note for every single cost code that's on your time card. It's very important for us to have these notes in the system because they are often lookups to see what was going on with the job. You may well remember what you did yesterday, but 6 months from now, you may have forgotten all of the details, and other users who access the system need to know those same details. So that's why we do cost code notes. So we have a HeavyJob time card. I have 4 cost codes on the time card already, and we will walk through the cost code note process. You see a button for each note under each cost code, and you can just walk through each one, click the button, and begin adding the note. A few things to know about this screen. There are 2 sections for cost code notes: company note private, inspector note public. Basically, the difference between the 2 sections is that within the manager system, we can run a report on Inspector Note Public that we can print out and distribute to the owner. We have a few job sites where the Inspector Note Public is used because the owner requires a daily report of all our foreman's diaries or cost code notes. So when you get into a situation where that's the case, your project management team will probably ask you to enter your notes in the Inspector Note Public. Otherwise, we typically enter all of our cost code notes in Company Note Private. To enter the note, just click in the box, the appropriate box, and start typing. As I said earlier, there is a minimum expectation that every cost code has a cost code note, and the expectation is also that every cost code note will contain, at the very least, the location of the work. Now, if you want to type in the station number, a street, an intersection, or something descriptive, that's fine, as long as we can look at this cost code note and tell with a fairly accurate degree of detail where you were working on that item that day. We know what you're doing because the cost code typically tells us what you're doing. In this case, I'm hoisting wall forms, but it's important historically that we know what section of the job site you were on when you did this activity. So I'm going to put in a station number, so we were at station 50 plus 23, and that's all we need, just a station. That's the minimum expectation. The other expectation is that you would enter any information for any event that day that may have affected your production. For example, if on this cost code I'm hoisting wall forms and I was using a crane and the crane broke down, I would want to enter that note. If I was short 2 laborers for the day and that affected my production, I'd want to enter that in the note. It doesn't have to be limited to just negative items. If something went really well on your cost code, go ahead and tell us in the cost code note why it went well, what you did differently to make that cost code go well that day. Once your cursor is in the appropriate box and you've entered a note, you want to drop to a new line, just hit your enter key and it will drop your cursor to a new line. Sometimes it makes sense to drop a couple of lines and type in the additional note. In addition to the cost code note, we have other items that you may be familiar with from the diary. We have note indexes, which means we can flag this cost code with a note index, and we have phrases. So let's look at each one of those items. On the note indexes, if you click the note index button, and you will see a list of all the note indexes that have been set up for that job. These are customizable at the job level, so if you don't see something that you think should be in the system, talk to your management team. Let's say we are going to check the box here for equipment breakdown and say okay, and what this means is that I've added the note index to this cost code. It automatically adds the line in your cost code notes. I've already put in that the crane was down for 3 hours, so I can move that over. And now I've satisfied two needs. I've explained my production for the day. I've also flagged this cost code note so that in the manager system, we can easily look for every time there was an equipment breakdown. That's the note index. There are many note indexes. You can put up to 10 note indexes on each cost code. And as I said, if you see things that you think maybe should be tracked at your job that aren't on this list, talk to management. The next item is called phrases, and there's a couple different ways to use phrases. So when you get to the phrases portion, you can see that everything is treed in the structure to the left. Now, if you want to expand an individual item, you can click the plus next to that and expand that item. You can click any of those, expand and collapse them. Two items here on phrases. The first one is note templates. A note template is a list of questions that somebody in the manager system has filled out, and they expect you to answer these questions. And a lot of times the questions are specific to the type of work. For example, if we're working on remove concrete, if I add that note template to the cost code note, it adds this list of questions. These note templates can be very useful because they remind you of the types of information that your management may want. The location, the line and station, the method of removal, excavator, by hand, quantity of removal, location of off-haul, method of payment. Some of these note templates are very extensive, some are very simple. The whole idea is that if you work at a location that is using note templates, they will probably tell you they want you to use a note template for every cost code note, and this is how you do it. Click on phrases and templates, expand the note templates, add those items to your cost code note. The second option with phrases and templates are the phrases themselves. Now, phrases don't get used very often because a lot of times a foreman will determine that by the time they find the phrase that they want to use, they could have typed the same information. And that's really what a phrase is. It's a shortcut to save you from typing. For example, if I expand the inspector phrase and I want to say the inspector didn't show, it will add that to my cost code note. If the inspector accepted. When you use these phrases, a lot of times you want to put something in conjunction with those. So for example, on the inspector accepted, I would go in and indicate what the inspector accepted. So phrases are there. Feel free to look at them and see if any of them make sense for what you're doing. Collapse the list, button on the left, expand the list, button on the right. See if any of those make sense. They are job-specific phrases, so if there's something that you think would make a nice addition to the options here for phrases, let your management know. That's it for the cost code note for this cost code. In order to make sure that I save this, I have to click the close button. There is no save button, and if you click the X, it will remove everything. So click the close button. You'll notice that the cost code note button under that first cost code is now bold, and that's telling you that a cost code note is there. If you hover the mouse over the cost code note button, you can read the note in a little pop-up window. You would go ahead and move on to the second cost code note, and again, minimum expectation. Give us a location, give us details, any issues that you had. Use the note indexes if appropriate, and if you're working on a location that's requested Inspector Note Public, be sure and put your cost code note in the Inspector Note Public. And that's it for the training video for cost code note.